Nigeria is faced with a plethora of challenges that threaten its stability, growth, and development. Citizens suffer from the issues of corruption, economic turmoil, and electoral irregularities, resulting in political polarization, as well as weak institutions that hinder effective governance and the lack of trust in the government. Also, high interest rates are due to the country's over-reliance on oil exports, which suffer global price fluctuations, resulting in high inflation rates, unemployment, and poverty. Nigeria is also grappling with the issue of insecurity, which has claimed thousands of lives and displaced millions. The result of this is the ongoing nationwide protests, which President Tinubu has urged protesters to put an end to and accept dialogue. Well, to take a look at the state of the nation amid the ongoing End Bad Governance protest, the Deputy National Publicity Secretary of the People's Democratic Party, Ibrahim Abdullahi, joins me now in the studio. But before we go to Ibrahim Abdullahi, our last guest, Dr. Tanko Yunusa, made some allusions to God and President Tinubu. We want to say clearly that Arise News does not promote any material that is indecent. We like to communicate or allow viewers to communicate whatever they have in mind decently in a way that is not insulting to anybody. So that is not the view of Arise News. Well, welcome, Mr. Abdullahi, to the program.
Thank you for having me, as always.
So it's the sixth day of the protest. How do you assess it? Is it waning, or do you see that it's holding up?
No, the protest was a success even before the first day. Of course, if you have followed events in this country, you would have seen 24 hours before the D-Day, the haphazard nature with which the government was reaching out, trying to broker peace, trying to, invite the protesters for dialogue, trying to seek intervention from well-meaning Nigerians that they believe could be able to intervene to nip it in the bud. But it was a very, very late decision for the government because it was a warning that lasted for 1 month. These protesters had warned that they were going to go on the streets, and they came up with their terms, which they expected the government to meet up with. And the government failed to meet up with these, demands. And here we are, the chicken has come home to roost. So it's unfortunate, it is sad, it's despicable to say the least, that in a democracy, you will have people's demand, petitioned for primordial and narrow consideration and sentiments. And so the government didn't do what it ought to do. The government is having intelligence at its disposal. And it is the one that has the wherewithal with which all of this clamor, if you ask me, would have been, addressed. But they failed to do so. So we're here to face it squarely.
So when you look at the protests, it has been mostly volatile in the northern part of the country where you come from. You know your region, you understand the people. Why do you think it's been the case there?
It is essentially because the northern part of the country has been besieged for over a decade now with poverty, to say the least, because of the absence of people in the farms, occasioned by insecurity. And that would be attributed to the terrible 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari, which crippled the economy of this country largely, but particularly in the northern part of the country. It was made difficult. Our people are predominantly farmers. They are dependent on their product to take to the market to sell. And they do menial jobs that are tied to agriculture. And this insecurity, frightening insecurity, it was under him that for the first time we came to know what is called banditry. We never knew all of this as at 2015 when PDP lost power. What we had were elements of attack in the fringes of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe, and that was Boko Haram. But when the APC took over power in 2015, we began to hear things like farmers had clashes, and then later banditry and what have you. So all of these things, is tied down to the policies of the APC as a party. It's a fallout of a defective system, as it were. And so the northern part of the country became vulnerable. And then you have army of unemployed youths, willing tools who are ready to unleash mayhem at every, and they are hungry to cry out loud. If you look at the western part of the country, or the south largely, you will agree that there are economic opportunities for their youths to get employed. and to be able to survive and make square meals and then be able to carry on with their life. It's not the case here.
Right.
Yeah, so this was a culminating factor, and they were ready to have all of these willing tools in their hands to play out.
The northern states receive a fairly large amount from the federal government, given the population and the size, because in Nigeria, revenue is shared according to population. Do you think the governors are doing enough?
Well, there are governors that are doing enough, in fairness to them. There are governors that are doing enough, but the opportunities in the northern part of the country, like I earlier stated, are lean. When you talk about...
But can they create the opportunities?
That for the few ones that are doing well, fairly, they are creating the opportunities. If you have agriculture, because we have expanse of land, we have the entire northern part of the country has comparative advantage in agriculture. If only we can delve and commit, substantial amount of our resources and interest in farming, we'll be able to salvage the situation and bring it. Industrialization that was another supporting, economic opportunity for the north is no longer there like we had in Kaduna, in Kano, way back in the 70s and the 80s. These things have withered away, no thanks to bad government, in successive governments in history. All of these things are not there now. So the only thing that would be able to resuscitate the economic and agricultural activities of the north would have been this agriculture.
Right.
But it is not there, no thanks to the bad policies of the APC, because insecurity has made it practically impossible for our farmers to go back to the land. And we found ourselves.
So the state governors have clamped down on the protests, their curfews. So it's calm for now. Do you think after this 10-day protest that this will bubble up again somewhere in the future, because the hunger persists?
Well, the much that I know a few governors are doing, like that of Plateau that I came out of just 3 days ago, and I know he also placed a curfew. Kaduna is doing same, but for Plateau, if I narrow it there, the kind of commitment that I see the governor deploying in ensuring that the youths are wiped off from the streets through education and through people-oriented and centered policies is capable of getting them off from the street, and that will reduce the risk of this agitation, if you ask me. There are a few other states that are following suit, and the government would be able to get the support of the federal government in matters of security, to be honest with you, because it's an overwhelming challenge that states alone cannot be able to confront with, since they are not in charge of the security apparatus in the country. So it will be a willing or a commitment from the part of our federal government to ensure that the state government function effectively. Otherwise, we will still be back to where we are. Very
few northerners publicly have called out former President Muhammadu Buhari. He's like a god in the north, for the disastrous performance of his government for 8 years. Why are you so frank about that?
Yeah, that is because that is the fact. You cannot separate the chaff from the chef if you don't attribute substantially 70%. Even the present government, in fairness to it, it inherited the behemoth of the problem. And then it's only because it's not also decisive. You cannot come without, getting into office and saying you are withdrawing the subsidy, and then following it up the next week with floating of the naira. These twin policies, brought this government to the sad situation that it is now. For the government to understand Nigerians to tight or fasten their belt, and then it's living large through deception. It's an aberration. It's the height of deception. There's no way you can, within the same period, in the same supplementary budget, you are deploying 160 billion to buy vehicles for the legislature, and then you are also taking 5 billion for a presidential yacht. Are those things priority? At the same time, you're talking about replacing the presidential jet of the president. At a time, people cannot go to bed with food in their belly. People are no longer surviving on 2 square meals. No, not even the one is available now. And then the frightening insecurity out there in the land. And then government is coming with some form of arrogance to make it look as if it's indispensable. No, so to a large extent, as much as we condemn the violent aspect of the protest, we are with Nigerians to say that, look, please, we are human beings. This is our country. We have fought collectively for this democracy. And there are no few elements that would enjoy it at the detriment of the majority. And then you expect peace in the land. No, certainly it's impossible.
I don't know if you've seen the videos in the north calling for change of government. What does the north really want? Because it's an APC government, majority of the states in the north are, run by APC governors. What does the north want?
I'm not sure you're right to narrow it to the north. The
Right.
protest was a general issue across the length and breadth of this country.
I'm talking about the videos calling for a change of government. Yeah.
Some are taking it to the extreme point, and as nationals, we are not going to, be in support of that. But the crux of the matter, we cannot shift away from the challenge, which is that the nation is angry, the nation is insecure. And those few elements that have taken the criminal aspect of it are the ones that we also join in condemning. And these people should stop calling all of this thing, whether they are doing it in the north or they are doing it in the south. What is important is that it is not the way to go. Government itself should have been in the position to nip it in the bud and to stem the tide before allowing it to get to this. And the ominous signals were there. You have seen what is happening across the world. You have seen the recent attack on the presidential villa of the Prime Minister of Bangladesh.
Yes.
She had to leave that. Look, people are waking up to the reality to realize that their fundamental rights cannot be trampled upon by some people because of their privilege in office.
Right.
So Nigerians are doing exactly what the global community is doing. Even our most developed clime in the world today, the UK.
Yes.
You've seen what has happened just 48 hours ago. People ransacking shops because of hunger, because of bad policies, of government. But that of Nigeria is frightening. It's unprecedented.
Mr. Abdullahi Ibrahim, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure, always. Thank you very much for having me.